The horse knew something was wrong before Caleb did. The mare stopped hard in the middle of the trail, front hooves locked, breath steaming in short, nervous bursts. Caleb tried urging her forward, but she backed up instead, tossing her head against the bit. "Come on, girl," Caleb muttered, pulling his scarf tighter against the wind. "Ain't got time for this." The snow was coming down sideways now, thick enough he could barely see 10 feet ahead. January in Montana Territory meant you either kept moving or you froze in place. Simple as that. The mare whinnied and sidestepped hard to the left. That's when Caleb saw it. Something dark breaking through the white. Not a rock, not a log. A hand. Caleb swung down from the saddle, boots sinking deep into fresh powder. The wind screamed across the open ground, biting through his coat like it was made of paper. He stumbled forward, squinting against the storm. The hand was palm up, fingers slightly curled. Snow had already started to bury it again. He brushed the powder away and found her face. Woman. Maybe 30 years old. Blonde hair frozen stiff against blue-gray skin, eyes half open, staring at nothing. Her mouth was open too, like she'd been calling for help when the cold finally took her. Caleb had seen plenty of bodies in his 43 years. War did that to a man. But something about the way her arm was stretched out, reaching, made his stomach turn. She'd been trying to get somewhere. He stood and looked around, vision blurred by snow and wind. There. Maybe 30 yards ahead, barely visible through the whiteout. A cabin. Small. Half-collapsed roof on one side. No smoke from the chimney. Probably abandoned years ago when the mining camps dried up. But she'd been crawling toward it when she died. Caleb's first instinct was to turn around. Dead woman in a blizzard wasn't his problem. He had his own ranch to get back to. His own livestock that needed feeding before the storm got worse. Mateo would be wondering where the hell he was. He took 2 steps back toward his horse, then stopped. The woman's hand was still reaching. "Damn it!" Caleb said into the wind. He trudged toward the cabin, each step a battle against snow that was already knee-deep. The door hung crooked on broken hinges, half open. No light inside. No sound except the howling wind. Caleb pushed the door wider. The smell hit him first. Unwashed bodies, sickness, rot. Then his eyes adjusted to the darkness. There were children everywhere, huddled against the far wall, curled up in corners, lying in piles of rags that might have been blankets once. He counted fast. 5, 6, 7, no, 9 of them. Ages ranging from maybe 16 down to what looked like a toddler, all of them staring at him with hollow, terrified eyes. "Jesus Christ," Caleb breathed. The youngest ones were crying quietly. The older ones just stared, too weak or too scared to move. Their clothes were torn, filthy, crusted with dirt and dried blood. Faces gaunt with hunger, skin pulled tight over bones. The cabin was freezing. There was a fireplace, but only cold ashes remained. No food anywhere he could see, no water, nothing. These kids had been left here to die. Caleb raised both hands slowly, trying to look harmless. "Easy now. I'm not going to hurt." Something moved fast across the floor. A girl, 12, maybe 13, dragging herself toward him on one good leg and one that bent at a wrong angle beneath her. She had dark hair matted with dirt, eyes burning with fever and fury, and a kitchen knife gripped in both hands. She positioned herself between Caleb and the other children, blade pointed straight at his gut. Her whole body was shaking, from cold or exhaustion or both, but her grip never wavered. "Get out," she said, voice rough and cracked. "Get out, or I'll cut you." Caleb froze. "I'm not here to hurt anybody." "That's what they all say." The girl's eyes were wild. "That's what the church people said before they robbed us. That's what the wagon master said before he left us in a ditch. That's what she said before she walked into that storm and never came back." The dead woman outside. Caleb felt something twist in his chest. "I found her," he said quietly, "out in the snow. I'm sorry." The girl's face didn't change. "Don't care. Leave." "You'll die if I do." "We'll die if you stay." She shifted her weight, wincing as pain shot through her bad leg. "Every time adults show up, kids disappear. Every time. So get the hell out before I stick this knife in your stomach." One of the younger children started crying louder. A boy, maybe 6 years old, with skin darker than the others and eyes swollen from weeping. "Evelyn! the boy whimpered. Evelyn, I'm cold. I know, Isaiah. The girl, Evelyn, didn't take her eyes off Caleb. We're all cold. Just hold on a little longer. Another child spoke up, a girl around 10 with black hair and Asian features. Evelyn, he might have food. Don't care. But I said I don't care, May. Evelyn's voice cracked. Last man who offered us food took Thomas, and we never saw him again. Remember? You remember what happened to Thomas? May went quiet. Caleb looked at the children again. Really looked. Some of them wouldn't last another day out here. Maybe not even another hour. Their lips were blue. Their breathing shallow. The toddler in the corner wasn't moving at all. He took one careful step forward. Evelyn lunged, slashing wildly with the knife. The blade caught Caleb's coat sleeve, ripping through leather but missing skin. He jerked back, hands still raised. I'm a rancher, he said quickly. My place is 15 miles south of here. I've got food, shelter, fire, medicine. Liar. I've got no reason to lie. Everyone's got a reason. Evelyn's voice dropped to something raw and broken. Everyone wants something. Money, labor, land, bodies to sell. We got nothing left to take, so just leave us alone. I don't want anything from you. Then why are you here? Caleb didn't have a good answer for that. He'd been asking himself the same question since he saw that frozen hand reaching through the snow. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. Evelyn laughed. Actually laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Right thing. You hear that, Isaiah? The right thing. She looked back at Caleb, eyes gleaming with tears she refused to let fall. The wagon master said he was doing the right thing when he took our money and left us in the middle of nowhere. The soldiers said they were doing the right thing when they burned the Lakota camp where May's mother was hiding. The mine boss said he was doing the right thing when he collapsed the tunnel on Isaiah's father because he asked for fair wages. She dragged herself forward another few inches, knife trembling in her grip. So forgive me if I don't give a damn about your right thing, mister. The wind outside screamed louder. Snow was starting to blow in through gaps in the walls. The temperature was dropping fast. Caleb looked past Evelyn at the other children. Some were watching. Some had given up and closed their eyes. One girl, blonde, maybe 8 years old, was rocking back and forth, lips moving silently like she was praying or reciting something over and over. He recognized that look. Shell shock. He'd seen it in soldiers after battles that broke them from the inside out. These kids were already ghosts. All right, Caleb said slowly. You don't trust me. I get it. But that little one in the corner, he nodded toward the toddler, isn't moving. You know what that means? Evelyn's jaw tightened. That means you got maybe an hour before you lose another one, Caleb continued. Then 2 hours after that, you'll lose the next. By morning, half of them will be dead. By tomorrow night, all of you. Shut up. I'm trying to help. We don't need your help. Evelyn's voice cracked completely now, tears streaming down her filthy cheeks, even as she kept the knife pointed at him. We made it this far without adults. We'll make it the rest of the way. To where? Silence. Where are you going, Evelyn? She didn't answer, because there was no answer. There was nowhere to go. No plan. No hope. Just a crippled 12-year-old girl trying to keep 8 other kids alive in a frozen cabin with no food, no fire, and no future. Caleb lowered his hand slowly and crouched down to her level, close enough now that she could stab him easy if she wanted, close enough to see the fever burning in her eyes and the blood soaked through the rag wrapped around her bad leg. I lost my family, he said quietly. My wife and 2 boys. Scarlet fever took them 6 years ago, all in the same week. I know what it's like to be alone, and I know what it's like to wish someone had been there to help when it mattered. Evelyn stared at him, knife still raised. So here's what's going to happen, Caleb said. I'm going to stand up and walk outside. I'm going to bring my horse around and load as many of you on her as I can fit. The rest will have to walk. It's 15 miles to my ranch, and this storm's going to get worse before it gets better. Some of you might not make it. He paused. But if you stay here, none of you will. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the little boy, Isaiah, spoke up again. Evelyn, please, I don't want to die. You won't die, Evelyn whispered. I won't let you die. Then come with me, Caleb said. Evelyn looked back at the other children. The blonde girl rocking in the corner, the Asian girl named May watching with desperate hope, the teenagers too weak to stand, the toddler who might already be gone. Her hands were shaking so hard the knife was rattling. "If you hurt them," she said finally, voice barely audible, "if you hurt even one of them, I swear I'll kill you. I don't care how long it takes. I'll kill you." Caleb nodded. "Fair enough." He stood and walked outside without looking back. The wind nearly knocked him over. Snow had already covered the dead woman again, burying her completely. He brought the mare around to the cabin door. The children came out slowly, one by one. Some had to be carried. Others leaned on each other. Evelyn dragged herself out last, still gripping that knife, eyes locked on Caleb like she expected him to attack at any second. He loaded the smallest ones onto the horse first. Isaiah, the black boy. A red-headed kid who looked Irish. Twin girls who couldn't have been more than 7. The toddler, limp and barely breathing. Caleb counted again. 9 children, 1 horse. This was going to be a long walk. "Stay close," he told them. "Don't fall behind. If you get lost in this storm, you're dead." Nobody argued. They started south. The first hour was hell. Caleb led the mare by the reins, fighting against wind that tried to rip him sideways off the trail. The children stumbled behind him in a ragged line, holding on to each other to keep from getting separated. The smallest ones rode the horse, bundled together under Caleb's spare coat. The older ones walked. Every 10 minutes he counted heads to make sure nobody had dropped behind. Evelyn refused to ride. She limped along at the back of the group, dragging her bad leg through snow that came up to her thighs. Blood was seeping through her boot now, leaving dark spots in the white powder. "You need to get on the horse," Caleb called back to her. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." "Said I'm fine." Stubborn as a mule. Caleb had known soldiers who fought with less determination. The blonde girl who'd been rocking in the cabin was walking next to Evelyn now, holding her hand. She still hadn't said a word, just walked with her head down, lips moving in that same silent rhythm. "What's her name?" Caleb asked May, the Asian girl walking beside him. "Lydia," May said quietly. "She hasn't talked since the fire." "What fire?" "The one that killed her family." May's voice was flat, factual, like she was describing the weather. "Prairie fire last September. Her parents, 3 brothers, and baby sister burned alive in their wagon. Lydia was the only one who got out." Caleb felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the blizzard. "She was trapped inside with them," May continued, screaming. The wagon master pulled her out through a window right before the whole thing collapsed. "Jesus." "She hasn't said a word since. Just moves her mouth like she's still screaming, but no sound comes out." They walked in silence after that. 2 hours in, one of the teenagers collapsed. A tall kid, maybe 15, with mixed features that suggested white and native blood. He just dropped face first into the snow and didn't get up. Caleb ran back, hauled the kid upright. His eyes were half closed, skin pale and cold. "What's your name, son?" The kid mumbled something incoherent. "His name's Samuel," Evelyn said, limping up beside them. "He's got fever. Had it for 3 days now." "Why didn't you say something?" "What difference would it make?" Evelyn's eyes burned into him. "You gonna cure him with magic?" Caleb bit back a response and lifted Samuel onto the horse, displacing 2 of the smaller kids. They immediately started crying from the cold. This wasn't going to work. Too many children, not enough horse, and the storm was getting worse by the minute. They'd barely covered 5 miles. Another hour, and they'd start losing them. "There's a trapper's shelter about 2 miles east," Caleb said, more to himself than anyone else. "If we can make it there, we can wait out the worst of the storm." "And if we can't?" Evelyn asked. Caleb didn't answer. They turned east. The shelter was barely standing, just 3 walls and a partial roof, half buried in drifted snow. But it was something. Caleb got the children inside and started a fire with the last of his dry kindling and a flask of kerosene he kept for emergencies. The flames caught quick, throwing heat and light into the cramped space. The children huddled around it like moths, pressing as close as they dared without burning themselves. Some were crying. Others just stared into the fire with empty eyes. Caleb pulled out the dried meat and hardtack he'd packed that morning. It wasn't much, Barely enough for one person, let alone 10, but he handed it out anyway. The children fell on it like wolves, except Evelyn. She took her piece, looked at it, then handed it to Isaiah without eating a bite. "You need to eat," Caleb told her. "I'm not hungry." "That's a lie." Evelyn glared at him. "I'm the oldest. I eat last. You're 12 years old. 13 next month. Maybe. If we're not all dead." She turned away and started checking the other children one by one, feeling foreheads for fever, examining cuts and scrapes, rewrapping makeshift bandages with strips torn from her own clothes. She moved like a field medic, efficient, detached, no wasted motion. This was what she'd been doing for months, Caleb realized, keeping them alive, all of them, through starvation, cold, disease, and God knows what else. No wonder she didn't trust adults anymore. Mateo was right. Taking these kids back to the ranch would ruin him financially. Winter supplies were already stretched thin. 9 extra mouths might be the thing that finally broke him. But watching Evelyn check Isaiah's frostbitten fingers with hands that shook from exhaustion, Caleb knew he couldn't walk away. Not from this. "Tell me what happened," he said quietly. Evelyn didn't look up. "Why?" "Because I need to know." "No, you don't. You just want to feel better about playing hero." "Evelyn, we were part of a wagon train heading to Oregon," she said flatly. 30 families. Left Independence, Missouri, last April. Things went bad fast. She paused, fingers still working on Isaiah's bandages. Cholera hit first. Killed 12 people in 2 weeks. Then the Sioux attacked near Fort Laramie because the wagon master was an idiot who didn't pay the toll for crossing their land. Lost 5 more families. May spoke up from across the fire. "My mother died in that attack. She was hiding me under a water barrel when the soldiers came." "What soldiers?" Caleb asked. "Ours," May said bitterly. "They showed up after the Sioux left, said they were there to help. Instead, they shot anyone who looked Indian. My mother was Chinese, but they didn't care. They killed her anyway." Evelyn continued. "After that, the wagon master started stealing from us. Food, money, anything valuable. When people complained, he'd leave them behind, just drive off while they were sleeping and disappear." "That's what happened to Thomas," Isaiah said quietly. "He complained about the food rations. Next morning, he was gone. Evelyn said the wagon master sold him to a mining camp." "I don't know for sure," Evelyn said, "but that's what usually happens to black kids nobody wants." The fire crackled. Snow hissed against what was left of the roof. "So we ran," Evelyn continued. 9 of us. Waited until everyone was asleep and just walked away from the train. Figured we'd be better off on our own." "Were you?" Caleb asked. Evelyn finally looked at him. Her eyes were old, too old. "We lasted 3 months. Found that cabin. The woman you saw outside, her name was Catherine. She was part of the wagon train too, older lady who helped take care of us after we ran. She went looking for help 2 days ago during a break in the weather." Her voice cracked. "She said she'd be back by nightfall. She promised." Silence. "And then you showed up," Evelyn finished. "So no, I don't trust you. I don't trust anyone. But I'm out of options." Caleb looked around at the 9 children huddled in the shelter. The toddler was breathing easier now, warming by the fire. Samuel's fever seemed to be breaking. The twins had fallen asleep holding each other. These kids had survived things that would break most grown men. "What's the toddler's name?" Caleb asked. "Henry," May said. "His parents died of fever outside Fort Kearney. His older sister took care of him until she got trampled by a horse 3 weeks ago." "And the twins?" "Rose and Ruth, Irish. Their father gambled away all their money, then drank himself to death. Their mother just walked away one day, left them in the middle of camp." One by one, Evelyn went through the list. Samuel, mixed-race kid whose native mother was murdered by settlers. The red-headed boy, Connor, whose parents were killed by outlaws. A skinny teenager named Marcus, whose family died in a mine collapse. Every single one of them abandoned, orphaned, or betrayed by the world. "Why'd you stay together?" Caleb asked. "Would have been easier to split up. Better chance of survival." Evelyn looked at him like he was stupid. "Because we're all we have," she said simply. "You split up, you're alone. You're alone, you die. Simple as that." The storm howled outside. The fire burned lower. Caleb stood and added more wood, the last of it. After this, they'd be running on fumes. "We leave at first light," he said. "Storm should ease up by then. It's another 10 miles to the ranch." "And then what?" Evelyn asked. "Then you get warm, you get fed, you get medicine." "For how long?" Caleb met her eyes. "As long as you need." "That's a lie." "No, it's not." "Yes, it is." Evelyn's voice was sharp. "Because people like you don't keep kids like us. You'll feed us for a few days, feel good about yourself, then ship us off to an orphanage or a factory or sell us to the first person who offers cash. That's how it works." "Not with me. Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm telling you the truth." Evelyn laughed that broken glass laugh again. "The truth? You want to know the truth, mister? The truth is that kids like us don't get happy endings. We get used up and thrown away. That's the truth." She looked around at the other children. "So I'll make you a deal," she said. "We'll come to your ranch. We'll eat your food and sleep under your roof. But the second I think you're lying, the second I think you're going to hurt these kids or sell them or abandon them, I'll take them and disappear, and you'll never find us." Her hand moved to the knife still tucked in her belt. "Are we clear?" Caleb looked at this fierce, broken 12-year-old girl who'd been forced to become a mother, a medic, and a soldier all at once, who'd kept 8 other children alive through hell itself, who trusted nothing and no one because the world had taught her that hope was just another word for pain. "Clear," he said. Evelyn held his gaze for another long moment. Then she nodded once and turned away, settling down between Isaiah and Lydia. Within minutes, most of the children were asleep. But Evelyn stayed awake, eyes open and watchful, one hand on her knife. Just like she'd probably stayed awake every night for the past 3 months, making sure they were all still breathing, making sure no one came to take them, making sure she didn't fail them the way every other adult in their lives had. Caleb watched her for a while, then looked into the dying fire. He'd told Evelyn the truth. He wouldn't abandon these kids. But he also knew the world didn't give a damn about truth. There were people out there who saw orphaned children as nothing more than cheap labor or easy money. People who'd hunt these kids down the second they realized what Caleb was hiding on his ranch. And when those people came, and they would come, Caleb would have to decide how far he was willing to go to protect 9 children who'd already lost everything. The fire burned lower. Outside, wolves howled in the darkness. And somewhere in the distance, through the storm, Caleb thought he heard horses. Darchin. They left at dawn. The storm had eased to a steady snowfall, cold but manageable. Caleb got the children moving while the light was still gray and weak. Samuel was worse. His fever had spiked during the night, and now he was barely conscious. Caleb carried him on his back while leading the horse with the smallest kids. The other children walked in a tight group, holding hands to keep from getting separated. Evelyn limped along at the rear, still refusing help, still watching everything with those suspicious, exhausted eyes. The last 10 miles took 6 hours. 3 times they had to stop because one of the kids collapsed. Twice Caleb thought he saw riders in the distance, but when he looked again there was nothing, just shadows and snow and paranoia. By the time the ranch came into view, the sun was already setting. It wasn't much to look at. A main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, and a few storage sheds scattered across wind-scraped land. But there was smoke rising from the chimney and light glowing in the windows. It looked like home. The children stopped at the edge of the property, staring. "This is it," Caleb said. "Come on." Nobody moved. Evelyn stepped forward, eyes scanning the buildings, the fences, the empty corrals, looking for threats, looking for traps. "How many people live here?" she asked. "Just me and my partner, Mateo." "Anyone else know we're coming?" "No." "Good. Keep it that way." She looked back at the other children, then at Caleb. "If this goes bad," she said quietly, "I'm holding you responsible." Then she limped forward, and the others followed. Mateo Ruiz met them at the door with a rifle in his hands and shock written all over his face. He was a wiry Mexican man in his 50s, weathered and tough as boot leather. He'd been Caleb's partner for 8 years, ever since they'd pooled their money to buy this failing ranch and turn it into something that almost made a profit. "Caleb?" Mateo stared at the 9 ragged, half-frozen children standing in the snow. "What in God's name—" "Long story," Caleb said. "Can you help me get them inside?" "Inside, Caleb, we can't—" "Mateo!" Something in Caleb's voice made Mateo stop. He looked at the children again. really looked, saw the hunger, the fear, the exhaustion. His expression softened. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's get them warm." They brought the children into the main house and settled them near the fireplace. Mateo disappeared into the kitchen and came back with bread, beans, and strips of salted pork that the kids devoured like they hadn't eaten in weeks, which they probably hadn't. Caleb carried Samuel to the back bedroom and laid him on the bed. The kid's fever was dangerously high now, his breathing shallow and ragged. "He needs a doctor," Caleb said. "Nearest doctor's in Black Hollow," Mateo replied. 20 miles, and there's another storm coming tonight." Caleb swore under his breath. Evelyn appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch someone had given her. She looked at Samuel, then at Caleb. "He's gonna die, isn't he?" she said flatly. "Not if I can help it." "That's not an answer." Caleb met her eyes. "No, it's not." Evelyn nodded once, like she'd expected nothing more. Then she turned and limped back to the main room where the other children were eating. Mateo waited until she was gone before speaking. "Caleb, we need to talk." They stepped outside into the cold. The sky was darkening fast, clouds rolling in from the north. "What are you doing?" Mateo asked quietly. "What does it look like?" "It looks like you just brought 9 orphans to a ranch that can barely support 2 people. I found them in an abandoned cabin. They would have died." "So you bring them here?" "Caleb, we're already stretched thin. Winter supplies are almost gone. The cattle are weak. We've got maybe 3 months of feed left if we're lucky, and that's just for the livestock." "I know." "Then you know we can't afford 9 extra mouths." "I know," Caleb repeated. Mateo stared at him. "Then why?" "Because I couldn't leave them." Caleb's voice was sharp. "You weren't there, Mateo. You didn't see what I saw. Those kids have been through hell. Adults robbed them, abandoned them, left them to die. That girl, Evelyn, she's 13 years old and she's been playing mother to 8 other children for months. She's got a crippled leg and a fever, and she's still standing because if she stops, they all die." He paused, trying to find the right words. "I couldn't walk away from that." Mateo was quiet for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You've got a good heart, Caleb. Too good. But good hearts don't pay debts, and we've got plenty of those. I'll figure something out." "Figure what out?" "We sell the spring calves and maybe we break even. Add 9 kids to that equation and we're bankrupt by summer." "Then we're bankrupt." "Caleb." "They stay, Mateo." Caleb's voice was final. "I don't care what it costs. They stay." Mateo shook his head slowly. "You're a stubborn son of a bitch, you know that?" "Yeah." "All right, they stay." Mateo looked back at the house where warm light spilled from the windows. "But when this all falls apart, don't say I didn't warn you." He walked back inside, leaving Caleb alone in the snow. Caleb looked out across the dark landscape. Somewhere out there, the storm was coming. And it wasn't just the weather he was worried about. Those kids had come from somewhere. People knew about them. And sooner or later, someone was going to come looking. When that happened, Caleb would have to decide how far he was willing to go. He thought about Evelyn's words in the shelter. "Kids like us don't get happy endings." Maybe she was right, but Caleb was damn sure going to try anyway. He turned and walked back inside, closing the door against the cold and the darkness and whatever the hell was coming next. Inside, the children were finally warm, finally safe, at least for tonight. Samuel didn't make it through the first night. Caleb found him just before dawn, lying perfectly still in the back bedroom with his eyes half open and his skin cold to the touch. The fever had burned through him like wildfire, and there'd been nothing anyone could do to stop it. Mateo stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, face grim. "Should I tell them?" he asked quietly. "No." Caleb pulled the blanket up over Samuel's face. "I will." The children were already awake when he walked into the main room. They'd spent the night huddled together near the fireplace, and now they sat in silence, watching him with eyes that already knew. Evelyn spoke first. "He's dead." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Caleb said. Nobody cried. Nobody screamed. They just sat there, absorbing it the way you absorb a punch you saw coming. Isaiah pulled his knees to his chest. Rose and Ruth held hands. May stared at the floor. Connor, the red-headed Irish kid, closed his eyes and took a long, shaky breath. Little Lydia kept moving her lips in that silent rhythm, rocking slightly back and forth. "Where do we bury him?" Evelyn asked. "There's a plot behind the barn," Caleb said. "We'll do it this morning, before the ground freezes any harder." Evelyn nodded once. Then she turned to the other children. "Get dressed. We owe Samuel a proper goodbye." They buried him an hour later under a gray sky that threatened more snow. The grave was shallow, ground was too frozen to dig deep, but it was enough. Caleb and Mateo lowered the body wrapped in spare blankets, and the children stood in a ragged line, shivering in coats that didn't fit right. Marcus, the skinny teenager, said a few words. Something about Samuel being brave and strong and deserving better than what he got. His voice cracked halfway through, and he had to stop. Nobody else spoke. When it was done, they covered the grave with rocks to keep animals out, and Evelyn placed a wooden cross Mateo had nailed together at the head of the mound. "Samuel," she said quietly, reading the name Caleb had carved into the wood. "No last name?" "Didn't have one," Marcus said. "Or if he did, he never told us." Evelyn touched the cross once, fingers lingering. Then she turned and limped back toward the house without looking back. The others followed. Caleb stayed behind, staring at the fresh grave. First death on his ranch in 6 years. Probably wouldn't be the last if he kept these kids through winter. Mateo walked up beside him. "You all right?" "No. Didn't think so." Mateo pulled out a cigarette, lit it, took a long drag. "Kid never had a chance. Fever like that, out in the cold for weeks. Surprised he lasted as long as he did." "Doesn't make it any easier." "No, it doesn't." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mateo said, "Town's going to hear about this." "Let them." "Caleb, I'm serious. 9 orphans show up at your ranch and one of them dies the first night. People are going to talk." "People always talk." "Yeah, but this time they're going to ask questions. Where'd the kids come from? Who are they? Why are they here? And when Sheriff Pike hears about it, Pike can go to hell," Mateo sighed. "You know he's been looking for a reason to come after you ever since you exposed his land grab scheme. This might be the excuse he's been waiting for." Caleb knew Mateo was right. Sheriff Dorian Pike was a vindictive bastard who'd held a grudge for 3 years. He'd find a way to twist this into something ugly. But that was a problem for later. "We'll deal with Pike when we have to," Caleb said. "Right now those kids need food, clothes, and medicine. Everything else can wait." Mateo dropped his cigarette and ground it out with his boot. "All right, I'll ride into Black Hollow this afternoon, pick up supplies, but we're going to need money. How much do we have left?" "Enough for maybe half of what we need." Caleb thought for a moment. "Sell 2 of the horses." "Caleb, we don't have a choice. Those horses are worth more in spring, and those kids will be dead by spring if we don't feed them now." Caleb's voice was sharp. "Sell the horses, Mateo. Do what you have to do." Mateo looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just nodded and walked away, leaving Caleb alone with the grave. Snow started falling again. Light at first, then heavier. Caleb watched it cover the rocks, the cross, the fresh-turned earth. Watched it erase the evidence that Samuel had ever existed at all. Then he turned and headed back to the house. The children were sitting around the table when he walked in, quiet and subdued. Evelyn was handing out portions of cornmeal mush that Mateo had cooked earlier, thin, watery stuff that barely counted as breakfast. Caleb noticed she was giving herself less than the others again. "You need to eat," he told her. "I'm eating." "Half a portion isn't eating." "It's enough." "Evelyn, I said it's enough." She glared at him with those fierce, exhausted eyes. "We got 8 people now instead of 9. That means the food lasts longer. Simple math." "That's not how it works." "Yeah, it is. I've been doing this for 3 months. I know how it works." Caleb wanted to argue, but Isaiah spoke up first. "Evelyn, please eat," the boy said quietly. "Samuel wouldn't want you to starve yourself." Evelyn's expression softened for just a second, then she shook her head. "Samuel's gone, Isaiah. We have to think about the rest of us now." She turned back to Caleb. "How long can we stay here?" "Long as you need." "That's not a real answer." "It's the only one I've got." Evelyn studied him, trying to figure out if he was lying. She did that constantly, watched, analyzed, tested, looking for cracks in the foundation. Waiting for the moment everything fell apart. "What do you want from us?" she asked finally. "Nothing. Everyone wants something. Not me. Then why are you doing this?" Caleb didn't have a good answer. He'd been asking himself the same question since he found them in that cabin. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said. Evelyn laughed, that same broken glass sound. "You already used that line, didn't work the first time." "Well, it's still true." "No, it's not." She leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You want to know what I think? I think you lost your family and now you're trying to fill the empty space with us. I think you're doing this for yourself, not for us." The other children went silent, watching. Caleb met Evelyn's eyes. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I am doing this for myself. But does it matter as long as you're warm and fed?" "Yeah, it matters. Because when you figure out we're not your dead kids and we can't fill that hole inside you, you're going to get rid of us. And then we're back to square one. That's not going to happen." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." "How?" "Because I'm telling you." Evelyn stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head and went back to eating her half portion of mush. The conversation was over, but the question lingered. Later that morning, Caleb found Lydia sitting alone in the barn, staring at the horses. She was still moving her lips in that silent rhythm, hands folded in her lap. He sat down beside her, careful not to spook her. "You like horses?" he asked. She didn't respond, just kept rocking slightly, lips moving. Caleb tried a different approach. "That mare over there, the black one? Her name's Maggie. She's been with me for 8 years. Smartest horse I've ever owned." Still nothing. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Caleb said quietly. "But if you ever do, I'm listening." Lydia's lips stopped moving for just a second. She glanced at him sideways, then went back to her silent recitation. Caleb stood and left her alone. May was outside chopping firewood, or trying to. The axe was too heavy for her, and she could barely lift it above her waist. "Here," Caleb said, taking the axe. "Let me show you." He demonstrated the proper stance, the right angle, how to let gravity do most of the work. May watched carefully, then tried again. Better. Not perfect, but better. "My father taught me to chop wood," she said quietly. "Before the soldiers killed him." Caleb didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. "He was a good man," May continued. "He came to America to build the railroad. Worked 16 hours a day for almost nothing. They treated him like dirt, but he never complained. He said we had to be grateful for the opportunity." She swung the axe again, splitting a log clean through. "Then the Sioux attacked our wagon train, and the soldiers came, and they shot him because he looked like the enemy." Her voice was flat, empty. "He died grateful for the opportunity." She dropped the axe and walked away. Caleb stood there alone, surrounded by split wood, and too many stories he didn't know how to carry. Connor found him an hour later hauling water from the well. "Need help?" the red-headed kid asked. "Sure." They worked in silence for a while, filling buckets and carrying them back to the house. Connor was stronger than he looked, wiry and quick, with the kind of toughness that came from surviving things he shouldn't have. "You don't have to keep us, you know," Connor said, suddenly. Caleb looked at him. "What?" "I'm just saying, if it's too much trouble, we can leave. We've done it before, we'll figure it out." "You're not leaving." "Why not?" "Because you're kids. You shouldn't have to figure it out on your own." Connor laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We've been on our own since the wagon train fell apart. Evelyn kept us alive. She'll do it again if she has to." "She's 13 years old, Connor. She shouldn't have to." "Yeah, well, the world doesn't care what people should or shouldn't have to do." Connor set down his bucket, wiping sweat from his forehead. "My parents got killed by outlaws 2 years ago, shot dead in front of me over a wagon full of supplies. The law didn't care. The church didn't care. Nobody cared. So we learned real quick that if you want to survive, you take care of yourself." He picked up the bucket again and kept walking. "But thanks anyway," he added over his shoulder. "For the food and the roof and all that. It's more than most people would do." Caleb watched him go, carrying water that was too heavy for a kid his age. That afternoon, Mateo left for Black Hollow with 2 horses to sell and a list of supplies they desperately needed. He didn't say when he'd be back, but Caleb knew it would take at least 2 days. One to get there, one to handle the sale and gather everything, one to get back. That left Caleb alone with 8 traumatized children who didn't trust him, a ranch that was falling apart, and a storm rolling in from the north. He spent the rest of the day trying to keep everyone busy. Showed Marcus how to mend fences. Taught Isaiah how to feed the livestock. Let Rose and Ruth help with cooking, even though they mostly just made a mess. Evelyn watched it all from the porch, leaning on her makeshift crutch, eyes suspicious and alert. "You're trying too hard," she said when Caleb walked past. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you're acting like everything's fine when it's not. You're broke, you've got 8 extra mouths to feed, and you just buried a dead kid, but you're out here playing teacher like we're one big happy family. Would you rather I give up?" "I'd rather you be honest." Caleb stopped and looked at her. "All right, honest? We're in trouble. Money's tight, food's running low, and winter's going to be brutal. Keeping you here might cost me the ranch, but I'm doing it anyway because walking away would make me the same as everyone else who abandoned you. Good enough?" Evelyn studied him for a long moment. "I still don't trust you." "I know. And the second I think you're lying, we're gone." "I know that too." She nodded once, like they'd reached some kind of understanding. Then she limped back inside, leaving Caleb alone on the porch. That night, the children slept in the bunkhouse, a drafty building that Caleb and Mateo usually used for storage. It wasn't warm, but it was better than sleeping outside. Caleb gave them all the spare blankets he had and stoked the fire as high as he dared without risking a chimney fire. The kids settled in slowly, claiming spots on the floor, huddling together for warmth. Some whispered to each other, others just lay in silence, staring at the ceiling. Evelyn sat near the door, back against the wall, knife in her lap. "You should sleep," Caleb told her. "I'm fine." "You've been awake for 2 days straight." "I said I'm fine." Caleb sighed. "You can't keep this up, Evelyn. You're gonna collapse." "Hasn't happened yet." "It will." She looked at him with those old, tired eyes. "Someone has to keep watch. Make sure nobody tries to take them." "Nobody's coming." "You don't know that. Evelyn, you don't know that." Her voice cracked. "You weren't there when the church people came in the middle of the night and tried to drag us onto a wagon. You weren't there when the wagon master sold Thomas to a mining crew. You weren't there when—" She stopped, breathing hard, fingers tight around the knife handle. "Someone always comes," she said quietly. "Someone always tries to take us. So I keep watch. Every night. Because if I fall asleep and something happens, it's my fault." Caleb crouched down in front of her. "What happened to those kids wasn't your fault." "Then whose fault was it?" "The people who hurt them." "I should have protected them better." "You're 13 years old. You did everything you could." "It wasn't enough." Caleb didn't have an answer for that. So he just sat down beside her, back against the wall, and said, "I'll keep watch tonight. You sleep." "I don't—" "That's not a request, Evelyn. You sleep, or I'm carrying you to a bed and locking the door." She glared at him. "You can't lock me in. Watch me." For a moment he thought she was going to argue. Then her shoulders sagged, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "If something happens," she said quietly, "you wake me up. Immediately. Deal." She hesitated, then slowly set the knife down and lay on her side, facing the other children. Within minutes, her breathing evened out. But even in sleep, her hand stayed close to the knife. Caleb sat there all night, keeping watch like he'd promised. Nothing happened. No one came. But he understood why Evelyn couldn't believe that. Mateo returned 3 days later with a wagon full of supplies and bad news. "Town's talking," he said, unloading sacks of flour and cornmeal. "About the kids. About Samuel. About you." "What are they saying?" "That you're hiding something, that the kids might be stolen, that you're running some kind of scheme." "That's ridiculous." "I know, but Pike's asking questions. He came into the general store while I was there. Wanted to know where the kids came from, who their parents were, whether you had legal custody." Caleb swore under his breath. "What did you tell him?" "That it was none of his damn business. But he's not going to let this go, Caleb. He smells blood in the water." Before Caleb could respond, a voice called out from the main road. "Mercer, I need a word." They both turned to see Sheriff Dorian Pike riding toward the ranch, flanked by 2 deputies. Pike was a thick-built man in his 50s with a permanent scowl and eyes like a snake. Caleb stepped forward, positioning himself between Pike and the house. "What do you want, Pike?" Heard you got some children staying here, Pike said, reining his horse to a stop. Thought I'd come see for myself. They're under my care. That's all you need to know. That's not how the law works, Mercer. I need names, ages, family information. Need to make sure these kids aren't runaways or stolen property. Stolen property? Caleb's voice was dangerous. They're children, Pike, not livestock. Orphans are wards of the state, Pike said, which means they fall under my jurisdiction. Now, you going to cooperate, or do I need to come back with a court order? Before Caleb could answer, the bunkhouse door opened and Evelyn limped out, followed by the other children. She positioned herself at the front of the group, chin raised, eyes locked on Pike. We're not going anywhere, she said clearly. Pike looked her up and down, taking in the crippled leg, the too thin frame, the defiant expression. You the one in charge, girl? I'm the one who'll cut your throat if you try to take us. Pike's deputies reached for their guns, but Pike held up a hand. Easy. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nobody's taking anyone. I'm just here to ask questions. Then ask, Evelyn said. What's your name? Evelyn Cross. Where are your parents, Evelyn? Dead. How'd they die? Cholera. Pike pulled out a small notebook, started writing. And the other children? Dead parents, all of them. Convenient. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. What's convenient about watching your family die? Convenient that you all ended up here, under the care of a man with no legal authority to keep you. Pike closed the notebook. See, here's what I think. I think Mercer here is running some kind of operation. Maybe he's using you for labor. Maybe he's planning to sell you. Either way, it's illegal. That's a lie, Caleb said. Then prove it. Show me custody papers. Show me proof these kids belong to you. They don't belong to anyone. Exactly, which means they're wards of the state. Pike smiled. And as sheriff, I'm authorized to remove them and place them in proper care. Over my dead body, Caleb said quietly. The deputies' hands moved to their guns again. Pike leaned forward in his saddle. You threatening a lawman, Mercer? I'm telling you the truth. These kids stay here. We'll see about that. Pike straightened up. I'll be back in 3 days with the proper paperwork. You better have answers ready, or I'm taking those children into custody. He turned his horse and rode away, deputies following. Evelyn watched them go, jaw tight. Then she looked at Caleb. He's going to take us, isn't he? No. You can't stop him. He's the law. Pike's not the law. He's a thug with a badge. Doesn't matter. He's got the power, and we don't. Evelyn's voice was bitter. We should leave now, before he comes back. You're not leaving. Then what are we supposed to do? Wait for him to drag us away? Caleb thought for a moment. Then he said, We fight. With what? You got no money, no lawyers, no proof we belong here. I'll find proof? How? Caleb didn't have an answer, but he knew one thing. He wasn't letting Pike take these kids. Not now, not ever. That night, he rode into Black Hollow alone, leaving Mateo to watch over the children. The town was quiet. Most businesses already closed for the evening. Caleb tied his horse outside the saloon and walked inside. The place was half full, mostly ranch hands and drifters looking to drink away the cold. Caleb scanned the room until he found who he was looking for. Vivian Sterling sat alone at a corner table, nursing a glass of whiskey and reading a newspaper by lamplight. She was a striking woman in her late 40s with sharp features and silver-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Wealthy, powerful, and ruthless when she needed to be. Caleb walked over. Mrs. Sterling, got a minute? She looked up, eyes cold and assessing. Mercer, heard you've been making waves. Pike came by my ranch today. I heard that too. She gestured to the empty chair across from her. Sit. Tell me what you need. Caleb sat. I need help. With the orphans. It wasn't a question. How'd you know? Small town. People talk. Vivian took a sip of whiskey. What makes you think I'd help you? Because Pike's involved, and I know you hate him as much as I do. Vivian smiled slightly. Hate's a strong word. I prefer professionally opposed. Whatever you want to call it. Point is, he's planning to take those kids, and I need to stop him. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. That's a terrible reason. It's the only one I've got. Vivian studied him for a long moment. Then she said, You know why I hate Pike, Mercer? Because he's corrupt. No, I can work with corruption. I hate him because he's stupid. She leaned forward. 5 years ago, my sister's 2 boys disappeared. Orphans, technically, after she died. Pike said they'd been placed with a good family back east. Turns out he sold them to a factory in Pennsylvania. One of them died in a machinery accident 6 months later. The other one vanished completely. Her voice was ice. So yes, Mercer, I'll help you, but not because it's the right thing to do, because I want Pike to suffer. Caleb nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Nothing yet, but when the time comes, I'll call in the favor. Understood? Understood. Vivian finished her whiskey and stood. Pike said he's coming back in 3 days. That gives us time to prepare. Meet me here tomorrow morning. Bring the girl, Evelyn. I'll need to talk to her. Why? Because if we're going to fight this, we need her story. All of their stories. Vivian's eyes were hard. Pike wants to paint you as a criminal. We need to paint him as the monster he is. She walked out, leaving Caleb alone at the table. He sat there for a while, thinking about what he'd just agreed to. Getting involved with Vivian Sterling was like making a deal with the devil. You got what you wanted, but the price always came due eventually. But if it meant keeping those kids safe, he'd pay it. He left the saloon and started back toward his horse. That's when he saw him. A man standing across the street, watching. Well-dressed, expensive coat, polished boots. Face smooth and clean-shaven, with the kind of practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. The man tipped his hat at Caleb, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Caleb stood there for a moment, instinct screaming that something was wrong. Then he mounted his horse and rode hard back to the ranch, a cold knot of dread forming in his gut. Something was coming, something worse than Pike, and when it arrived, Caleb had a feeling it would take more than good intentions to stop it. The man's name was Silas Granger, and he showed up at the ranch 2 days later with a smile that made Caleb's skin crawl. He arrived in a polished black carriage, pulled by matching gray horses that looked too expensive for Montana territory. His clothes were Eastern, tailored suit, silk vest, gold watch chain hanging from his pocket. Everything about him screamed money and authority. Caleb was mending fence posts when the carriage rolled up. He set down his hammer and walked over, Mateo falling in beside him. "Can I help you?" Caleb asked. Granger stepped down from the carriage, brushing dust from his sleeves. "Mr. Mercer, I presume. Silas Granger, representing the Western Children's Aid Society. I'm here about the orphans currently residing on your property." "They're under my care, so I've heard." Granger pulled out a leather portfolio, flipped it open. "I have documents here from the territorial government authorizing our organization to place abandoned children in appropriate homes. I'd like to discuss arrangements for the children staying here." "There's nothing to discuss. They're staying." Granger's smile never wavered. "Mr. Mercer, I appreciate your charitable impulses, but these children need proper placement. We have families waiting, good, Christian families who can provide education, stability, employment opportunities." "Employment?" Mateo cut in. "You mean labor." "Honest work builds character," Granger said smoothly. "Surely you understand the value of teaching children responsibility." "I understand what you're selling," Caleb said, "and I'm not interested." Granger's smile tightened slightly. "I'm afraid it's not your decision to make. These children are wards of the state. Without legal custody, you have no authority to keep them." "Then I'll get legal custody." "That process takes months, requires fees, court appearances, character witnesses. Can you afford that, Mr. Mercer?" Granger gestured at the ranch around them. "This place looks like it's barely holding together. How exactly do you plan to support 8 additional children through winter?" Caleb took a step closer. "Get off my property." "I'm simply trying to help. I said get off my property." Granger studied him for a moment, then carefully closed his portfolio. "Very well. But you should know that Sheriff Pike has already filed paperwork to have the children removed. The judge will rule in our favor, and when that happens, these children will be placed whether you cooperate or not." He climbed back into his carriage, then leaned out the window. "One more thing, Mr. Mercer. I've been doing this work for 15 years. I've seen hundreds of orphans pass through the system. The ones who cooperate, who accept their circumstances, they do well. The ones who fight." He shook his head sadly. "They don't survive long." "That a threat?" "Just an observation." Granger tapped the roof of the carriage. I'll be seeing you soon." The carriage rolled away, leaving deep ruts in the frozen mud. Mateo spat in the dirt. "I don't like him." "Neither do I." "You believe him? About the judge?" Caleb watched the carriage disappear down the road. "Yeah, Pike's got connections. If he wants those kids taken, he'll make it happen." "So what do we do?" "We fight harder." Inside the bunkhouse, Evelyn had heard everything. She sat by the window, watching Granger's carriage retreat, her face pale and tight. The other children gathered around her. "Who was that?" Isaiah asked. "Trouble," Evelyn said quietly. "What kind of trouble?" She looked at him, at all of them, and Caleb saw the calculation in her eyes. She was already planning their escape route. "Evelyn," he said from the doorway. "Don't." She turned to face him. "Don't what?" "Don't run. Not yet." "You heard him. They're coming for us." "I heard him. And I'm telling you we can fight this." "How?" Evelyn stood, leaning heavily on her crutch. "You got no money, no legal claim, and no way to stop them. Running's the only option." "Running's what got you stuck in that frozen cabin in the first place." Evelyn flinched like he'd slapped her. "That's not fair." "Maybe not, but it's true." Caleb walked into the room, crouched down so he was eye level with her. "You've been running for months, Evelyn. And where'd it get you? Starving, freezing, watching Samuel die because there was no one to help. You keep running. That's all you'll ever do. Run until there's nowhere left to go." "At least we'd be free. You'd be dead. Better than being sold to a factory. That's not going to happen. You don't know that." "You're right. I don't." Caleb stood. "But I know this. Vivian Sterling wants to help. She's got money, connections, reasons to hate Pike just as much as we do. We meet with her tomorrow, tell her your stories, and maybe we build a case strong enough to stop this. And if we can't, then we figure out plan B." Evelyn stared at him for a long moment. "You really believe we can win this?" Caleb wanted to say yes, wanted to give her the reassurance she desperately needed. But he'd learned a long time ago that empty promises did more harm than lies. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know we can try. That's more than you had yesterday." Evelyn looked at the other children, all watching her, waiting for her decision. She was their leader, their protector. Whatever she decided, they'd follow. Finally, she nodded once. "One meeting. That's all I'm promising. That's all I'm asking." The next morning, Caleb, Evelyn, and May rode into Black Hollow together. Mateo stayed behind to watch the other children and make sure no one tried anything while they were gone. Vivian Sterling was waiting for them at her estate on the edge of town, a sprawling two-story house that made Caleb's ranch look like a shack. She received them in her study, a wood-paneled room lined with books and expensive furniture. "Sit," she said, gesturing to chairs arranged in front of her desk. Evelyn limped in and sat down stiffly, May beside her. Both girls looked uncomfortable, out of place in surroundings this fine. Vivian didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to know what happened. Everything. Start from the beginning." Evelyn glanced at Caleb, who nodded. Then she started talking. She told Vivian about the wagon train, the deaths, the betrayals, about adults who robbed them, abandoned them, sold them, about watching Thomas disappear, about Catherine dying in the snow, about 3 months of barely surviving in a frozen cabin. May filled in her own story, her father's murder by soldiers who couldn't tell Chinese from Lakota, her mother's desperate attempt to hide her, the terror of growing up believing the world wanted her dead just for existing. Vivian listened without interrupting, her face unreadable. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what the Western Children's Aid Society really is?" she asked finally. Evelyn shook her head. "It's a trafficking operation disguised as charity," Vivian said bluntly. "They take orphans from Western territories and ship them east to factories, mines, mills. The children are sold as indentured labor, basically slavery with a legal veneer. The families who adopt them get cheap workers. The society gets paid per child delivered. Everyone profits except the children." She leaned forward. "I've been tracking them for 3 years. I have evidence of over 200 children who disappeared into their system. Most are never heard from again. The ones who are..." She paused. "Let's just say the survival rate is not good." Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. "And the law doesn't stop them?" "The law is how they operate. They have judges, sheriffs, politicians in their pocket. As far as the courts are concerned, they're performing a public service. So we can't beat them legally. I didn't say that. Vivian pulled out a folder, slid it across the desk. There's a federal prosecutor named Nathaniel Reed. He's been building a case against child labor exploitation in the territories. If we can get your testimony to him, if we can connect Pike and Granger to the broader network, we might have a chance. Evelyn flipped through the folder. It was full of newspaper clippings, affidavits, court documents, evidence of a system built on stolen childhoods. How long would this take? She asked. Weeks, maybe months. Pike said he's coming back in 2 days with a court order. Then we stall him. Vivian stood and walked to the window, looking out at the town. I'll file an injunction claiming improper procedure. That'll buy us time. Meanwhile, I'll send word to Reed, get him here as fast as possible. And if Pike doesn't care about the injunction, Caleb asked, then we make him care. Vivian turned back to them. I own half this town, Mercer. I employ half the people Pike claims to protect. If he wants a war, he'll get one. Evelyn looked at Caleb, then at Vivian. Why are you doing this? I told Mercer already. My nephews were taken by this same organization. One died. One vanished. I couldn't save them. Vivian's voice was ice. But I can save you, and in the process, I can destroy the people who killed my family. So you're using us for revenge? Yes. Does that bother you? Evelyn thought about it, then shook her head. No, as long as it works. Vivian smiled slightly. Smart girl. I like you. They spent the next hour going over the plan in detail. Vivian would file the injunction first thing tomorrow morning. She'd also put out word that anyone who helped Pike remove the children would lose their jobs, their contracts, their standing in the community. Meanwhile, Caleb would keep the children safe at the ranch and wait for word from Reed. It was a fragile plan, held together with money and influence and hope that the system could be forced to work for once. But it was something. They left Vivian's estate as the sun was setting. On the ride back, Evelyn was quiet, staring at the darkening landscape. You okay? Caleb asked. That woman, Vivian, she scares me. She should. She's dangerous. But she's helping us. For now, because our goals align. Caleb glanced at her. But don't mistake her for a friend, Evelyn. She's using us to get what she wants. When this is over, she'll collect her debt. What kind of debt? I don't know yet. But whatever it is, I'll pay it. Not you. They rode in silence for a while. Then Evelyn said, Do you think this will work? The legal fight? I think it's the best chance we've got. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Evelyn looked down at her crippled leg, at the boot stained with old blood. I'm tired, Caleb. Tired of running, tired of fighting, tired of watching people die. Part of me just wants to give up. But you won't. No, I won't. She looked up at him. You know why? Why? Because those kids back at the ranch are counting on me, and I'd rather die than let them down. Caleb didn't have a response to that. What could he say to a 13-year-old girl who carried more weight than any child should? They reached the ranch after dark. Mateo met them at the door, looking tense. We got company, he said quietly. Pike? No, townsfolk. Been showing up all afternoon, dropping off supplies, food, blankets, clothes. Mateo gestured at the porch, which was covered with boxes and bundles. Some lady named Martha brought 3 jars of preserves and a whole chicken. Said she heard about the children and wanted to help. Caleb stared at the pile of donations. How many people came? 7, maybe 8. All said the same thing. They wanted to help. Evelyn limped past them into the house. The other children were eating dinner at the table, wearing clothes that actually fit for once. Rose and Ruth were dressed in matching dresses. Isaiah had new boots. Connor wore a coat that didn't have holes in it. Where'd these come from? Evelyn asked. Lydia looked up from her plate and pointed at the pile of boxes in the corner. For a moment, her lips stopped moving. Then she went back to eating, silent as always. Me walked over to Evelyn. People heard about us. They're helping. Why? I don't know. Maybe they're just good people. Evelyn looked skeptical. Or maybe they want something. Does it matter? May asked. We have food now, real food, and clothes that fit. That's more than we've had in months. She was right. And watching the children eat actual meals, wearing clothes without bloodstains and holes, Caleb felt something shift inside him. Maybe the town wasn't all bad. Maybe some people still cared. That hope lasted exactly 12 hours. The barn burned just after midnight. Caleb woke to the sound of horses screaming and the smell of smoke. He bolted out of the house to see flames consuming the entire structure, fire climbing into the night sky like something alive and hungry. "Mateo, get water!" he shouted, already running toward the barn. The horses were trapped inside, kicking at their stalls, eyes rolling with terror. Caleb grabbed a bucket, threw water on the door, kicked it open. Heat blasted him in the face. He couldn't see anything through the smoke, just shapes moving in the darkness, firelight dancing off walls that were starting to collapse. "Come on!" he yelled at the horses. "Move!" One of them bolted past him, nearly knocking him down. Another followed, but Maggie, his oldest mare, was stuck at the back of the barn, too scared to move. Caleb ran through the fire, flames licking at his clothes. He grabbed Maggie's bridle, pulled hard. She reared up, nearly crushing him, then finally lurched forward. They made it out just as part of the roof collapsed behind them, sending up a shower of sparks and burning debris. Caleb fell to his knees in the snow, coughing smoke, eyes streaming. Mateo hauled him further away from the fire. "You all right?" Mateo asked. "Yeah, the horses. Most of them got out, lost two." Mateo looked at the burning barn. "This wasn't an accident, Caleb." "I know." Behind them, the children had gathered on the porch of the bunkhouse, watching the fire with wide, terrified eyes. And Lydia was screaming, not silent anymore, actually screaming, high and piercing, hands over her ears, eyes squeezed shut. The sound was raw and broken, like something tearing loose inside her. Evelyn tried to hold her, but Lydia thrashed away, screaming louder. The other children backed up, scared by the sound. "Lydia, it's okay," Evelyn said desperately. "It's okay, we're safe. Fire, fire, they're burning." Lydia's voice was hoarse, like she hadn't used it in months. "Mama's burning, Tommy's burning, everyone's burning." She collapsed to her knees, sobbing, still screaming words that didn't make sense. Evelyn dropped down beside her, pulling her close, and this time Lydia didn't fight. "I know," Evelyn whispered, rocking her. "I know. But it's over now. It's over." But it wasn't over. Because as the barn burned and Lydia screamed and the children cried, Caleb saw riders approaching from the main road. Sheriff Pike, flanked by 6 armed deputies. And behind them, Silas Granger in his expensive carriage. They stopped at the edge of the property, silhouetted against the fire. Pike dismounted and walked forward, holding a rolled-up document. "Caleb Mercer," he called out. "I have a court order authorizing the immediate removal of all orphaned children currently residing on this property. You will surrender them now, or I'll have you arrested for obstruction." Caleb looked at the burning barn, at Lydia's broken screaming, at Evelyn holding her with tears streaming down her face. "No," he said. Pike smiled. "That's what I was hoping you'd say." He gestured to his deputies. "Take them." The deputies moved forward, hands on their guns. Mateo stepped in front of the children. "You'll have to go through us first." "That can be arranged," Pike said. Caleb's mind raced. 6 armed men against 2 ranchers and 8 terrified children. This wasn't a fight they could win, but then he heard something that changed everything. Hoofbeats. A lot of them. From the south road, a group of riders appeared. 15, maybe 20 of them. At the front was Vivian Sterling, sitting tall in her saddle, flanked by armed ranch hands. She rode straight up to Pike, her horse stopping inches from him. "Sheriff," she said coldly, "I filed an injunction this morning blocking your court order. That makes your presence here illegal." Pike's smile faded. "The hell you did? Check with Judge Morrison if you don't believe me." Vivian pulled out her own document, waved it in Pike's face. "This order supersedes yours. You have no authority here. This is interference with the law. This is protecting children from a corrupt sheriff and a trafficker." Vivian's voice cut like a knife. "That's Silas Granger behind you, isn't it? The same Silas Granger wanted for questioning in Pennsylvania regarding the deaths of 14 children in factory accidents? The same man who's been moving orphans across state lines for profit?" Granger's face went carefully blank. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "I'm sure you don't. Just like you had no idea about the mining camp in Nevada where 12 children died in a tunnel collapse. Or the textile mill in Ohio where... Enough, Pike snapped. I don't care what accusations you throw around, Mrs. Sterling. That court order is legitimate. And my injunction blocks it, Vivian gestured to her men. Now, you can leave peacefully, or we can have a problem. Your choice. Pike looked at his 6 deputies, then at Vivian's 20 armed ranch hands. The math wasn't hard. This isn't over, he said finally. No, it's not. Vivian's smile was cold. But for tonight, you're done here. Pike remounted his horse. He looked at Caleb one last time, eyes promising violence, then rode away. Granger followed, but not before stopping his carriage next to Caleb. You should have taken my offer, he said quietly. Now this is going to get ugly. It's already ugly. Granger smiled. You have no idea. He tapped the roof of the carriage and rolled away into the darkness. Vivian dismounted and walked over to Caleb. Behind them, the barn fire was finally dying down, leaving nothing but smoking ruins. You're welcome, she said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I bought you time, nothing more. Pike will be back, probably with a better lawyer and more deputies. And Granger. She looked at the retreating carriage. He's more dangerous than Pike. He's got connections I haven't been able to trace yet. Money, power, political protection. What do we do? We get Reed here as fast as possible. I sent a telegram this afternoon. If he moves quickly, he could be here in 3 days. And if he doesn't? Vivian looked at the children huddled on the porch. At Lydia, who had finally stopped screaming and now just sobbed quietly in Evelyn's arms. At Evelyn, who stared at Vivian with those old, suspicious eyes. Then we prepare for war, Vivian said. She remounted her horse. Her men followed suit. I'll post guards on the main road, she said. Anyone tries to come for those kids, they'll have to go through me first. Why are you doing this? Caleb asked. You said it was revenge, but this is more than that. Vivian looked down at him, and for just a moment, her cold mask slipped. He saw something raw underneath, grief, rage, regret. Because I couldn't save my nephews, she said quietly. But maybe I can save them. She rode away, her men trailing behind her. Caleb stood alone in the snow, watching the last embers of the barn glow in the darkness. Everything smelled like smoke and ruin. Mateo walked up beside him. We just made some powerful enemies. I know. This is going to get worse before it gets better. I know that too. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Mateo said, You sure about this? It's not too late to back out. Let Pike take the kids, wash our hands of the whole thing. Caleb looked back at the bunkhouse. Through the window, he could see Evelyn still holding Lydia, rocking her gently. The other children gathered around them, a tangle of small bodies seeking comfort in proximity. Yeah, he said. I'm sure. Mateo sighed. All right then. What do we do now? Now we wait for Reed, and we pray he gets here before Pike comes back with something we can't fight. But even as he said it, Caleb knew prayer wasn't going to be enough. This was heading somewhere dark, somewhere violent, and when it finally exploded, a lot of people were going to get hurt. He just hoped the children wouldn't be among them. Inside the bunkhouse, Evelyn had finally gotten Lydia calmed down enough to sleep. The little girl lay curled in a ball, exhausted from screaming, her voice raw and broken. The other children were quiet, shaken by everything that had happened. Isaiah spoke up first. They're going to take us, aren't they? No, Evelyn said firmly. They're not. But you heard the sheriff. I heard him, and I heard that woman, Vivian, tell him to back off. Evelyn looked around at all of them. We're not giving up. Not yet. But what if they come back? Rose asked, her twin sister Ruth clutching her hand. What if they come with more men? Then we fight. We're kids, Marcus said bitterly. We can't fight grown men with guns. Maybe not. But we can run. We can hide. We can survive. Evelyn's voice was steel. That's what we've been doing this whole time, and we're still here, aren't we? The children nodded slowly, drawing strength from her certainty, even though Caleb could see the fear in her eyes. She didn't believe her own words any more than they did, but she said them anyway because that's what leaders did. They lied to keep hope alive. Caleb stepped inside. Everyone all right? We're fine, Evelyn said. What about the barn? Gone. Lost 2 horses. The rest are in the corral for now. Was it Pike? Probably. Or Granger. Doesn't matter. It was a warning. Warning of what? Caleb met her eyes. That they're not playing around anymore. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then she said, "That woman, Vivian. Can we trust her?" "I don't know. Maybe. She's got her own reasons for helping us. Which means she'll stop helping the second it doesn't benefit her anymore." "Yeah. So we're on our own." "We've always been on our own, Evelyn." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that broke his heart. "I'm sorry I dragged you into this." "You didn't drag me anywhere. I chose this." "You chose wrong. We're going to get you killed. Maybe. But at least I'll die doing something that matters." Evelyn's eyes welled up, but she blinked the tears back. "That's stupid. Dying doesn't matter. Living matters." "Then let's focus on living." He left them there and walked back outside into the cold. The burned barn smoldered in the darkness. The smell of smoke hung heavy in the air. Somewhere out there, Pike and Granger were planning their next move. And Caleb had no doubt it would be worse than burning a barn. They were coming for the children, and Caleb was running out of ways to stop them. Nathaniel Reed arrived on the third day, stepping off the evening stage with a leather satchel and the kind of exhaustion that came from traveling 200 miles in 48 hours. He was younger than Caleb expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles and ink stains on his fingers. He wore a wrinkled suit and carried himself with the nervous energy of someone who'd seen too much and couldn't stop looking for more. Vivian met him at the station with her carriage. Caleb and Evelyn were waiting at her estate when they arrived. Reed didn't waste time with introductions. He dropped his satchel on Vivian's desk, pulled out a stack of folders, and spread them across the surface. "I've been tracking the Western Children's Aid Society for 18 months, he said without preamble. They operate in 7 territories, moving between 200 and 300 children per year. Most end up in factories, mines, or agricultural labor. The mortality rate is approximately 40% within the first 3 years. Evelyn's face went pale. 40%? Accidents, disease, malnutrition, abuse. The facilities they place children in don't maintain records, so exact numbers are hard to verify. But based on testimony I've collected, 40% is conservative. He pulled out a map marked with dozens of red pins. These are confirmed locations where children from the society have been placed. Pennsylvania, Ohio, Nevada, Colorado. I have affidavits from 16 survivors, death certificates for 23 children, and witness statements connecting at least 12 officials to the operation. Including Pike? Caleb asked. Including Pike. Reed opened another folder, showed them a series of bank transfers. He's been receiving payments from the society for 4 years, $500 per child delivered. He's made over $30,000 selling orphans. Vivian leaned forward, studying the documents. Can you prove it in court? I can prove the payments. Proving Pike knew what he was facilitating is harder. He'll claim he thought he was helping place children in good homes. What about Granger? Reed's expression darkened. Silas Granger is the architect. He started the society 6 years ago after working as a labor contractor in Pennsylvania. He realized orphans were a perfect resource. No families to ask questions, no records to track them, no one to care if they disappeared. He built an entire network around exploiting that invisibility. He pulled out a photograph, slid it across the desk. It showed Granger standing with a group of well-dressed men in front of a factory. That's him with Senator Crawford and Judge Harrison, both investors in textile mills that use child labor. Granger supplies the workers. They provide legal protection. It's a closed loop. Evelyn stared at the photograph. How do we stop him? Testimony. I need survivors willing to testify about what happened to them. Children who can describe the conditions they were placed in, the abuse they suffered, the lies they were told. Reed looked at her. I need your story, Evelyn. All of you. On record. And then what? You arrest him? If the testimony is strong enough, yes. I can bring federal charges, conspiracy, fraud, violation of labor laws. If we can connect him directly to deaths, we might get kidnapping or manslaughter. Might, Evelyn repeated. That's not a guarantee. No, it's not. Reed removed his glasses, rubbed his eyes. The people Granger works with have money and influence. They'll fight back with everything they have. This won't be easy. Nothing ever is, Evelyn said bitterly. They spent the next 2 hours going over details. Reed took notes in careful handwriting, asking questions that made Evelyn's hands shake and her voice crack. He asked about Thomas, about Catherine, about Samuel. He asked about the wagon master who robbed them, and the adults who abandoned them, and the systems that failed them at every turn. When he got to May, asking about her father's murder, the girl's voice went flat and mechanical, like she was reading from a script she'd memorized. The soldiers came after the Sioux attack, May said. They said they were protecting us, but they looked at my mother and decided she was the enemy. She tried to explain she was Chinese, not Lakota. They shot her anyway. 3 bullets. I watched her die. Reed wrote it all down, his pen scratching across paper. When he got to Lydia, the little girl just shook her head and looked at the floor, lips moving in that silent rhythm again. She doesn't talk much, Evelyn explained. Fire killed her family. She's been like this since. Can she testify? I don't know. Maybe. If she trusts you. Reed closed his notebook. I'll need formal depositions from all of you, signed statements that can be entered as evidence. It'll take time. How much time? Caleb asked. A week? Maybe 2. Then I file charges and request an emergency injunction preventing any child removal until the case is resolved. Pike won't wait 2 weeks, Vivian said. He'll move before then. Then we stop him. Reed's voice was firm. I have federal authority. If Pike interferes with this investigation, he'll face charges himself. You don't know Pike, Caleb said. He doesn't care about charges. He cares about winning. Then we'll have to make sure he doesn't. They left Vivian's estate as darkness fell. On the ride back to the ranch, Evelyn was quiet, staring at the frozen landscape. You think Reed can actually stop them? She asked finally. I think he's going to try. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. Evelyn pulled her coat tighter against the cold. I don't trust him. Why not? Because he's using us too, just like Vivian, just like everyone. We're not people to them. We're evidence, proof, something to build a case on. Maybe. But if it stops Granger, does it matter? Yeah, it matters. Evelyn's voice was sharp. Because when this is over and they've got what they want, where does that leave us? Still orphans, still nobody, still invisible. Caleb didn't have an answer for that. They reached the ranch after dark. Mateo had kept the other children inside, teaching them card games to distract them from the tension. When Evelyn walked in, they all looked up hopefully. What'd the lawyer say? Isaiah asked. He's going to help, Evelyn said. Maybe. What does maybe mean? It means we wait and see. That night, Caleb couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, rifle across his lap, watching the road. Vivian's guards were posted at the property line, but he didn't trust them to stop what was coming. Around midnight, Mateo joined him. You look like hell, Mateo said. Feel like it too. Think Reed can pull this off? I don't know. He's got evidence, but evidence doesn't always matter when the other side has more money. So what do we do? Hope for the best. Prepare for the worst. Mateo lit a cigarette, offered one to Caleb. They smoked in silence, watching darkness beyond the fence line. You know this is going to end badly, Mateo said finally. One way or another. Yeah. And you're still doing it. Yeah. Why? Caleb thought about that, about his wife and sons dead from fever 6 years ago, about the emptiness that followed, about spending years just existing, not living. Because it's the first thing that's felt like it matters in a long time, he said. Mateo nodded slowly. All right then. We do this together. You don't have to. I know, but I'm doing it anyway. Mateo flicked his cigarette into the snow. Someone's got to make sure you don't get yourself killed. The next morning, Reed arrived at the ranch with a stenographer, a thin woman named Clara, who sat up at the kitchen table with pen and paper. We'll do formal depositions today, Reed said, one at a time. Start with the oldest, work our way down. Marcus went first. He told Reed about the mine collapse that killed his father and 3 brothers, about being left with nothing except debt his family owed the company, about the mine boss who tried to force him into labor to pay it off. I ran, Marcus said. Walked for 2 weeks until I found the wagon train. They took me in because they needed extra hands. And after the wagon train fell apart? Reed asked. Evelyn found me trying to steal food from their camp. She could have turned me in. Instead, she shared what they had. His voice cracked. She saved my life. Connor told his story next. Irish immigrant parents killed by outlaws. left alone at 12 years old with nothing but the clothes on his back. I thought about going back to Ireland, Connor said, but I had no money, no way to get there. So I just kept walking west, hoping I'd find something better. Did you? No, just found more ways to almost die. Isaiah's story was the hardest to hear. Born free after the war, only to watch his father murdered by white miners who didn't want black workers competing for jobs. They strung him up outside the camp, Isaiah said, his voice barely above a whisper. Made everyone watch, said it was a warning. How old were you? Reed asked gently. 6. Reed closed his eyes briefly, then kept writing. When they got to Rose and Ruth, the twins spoke in overlapping sentences, finishing each other's thoughts. Papa gambled away everything, and Mama couldn't take it anymore. So she just left one morning and never came back. And your father? Reed asked. Drank himself to death, Rose said. 3 weeks later, Ruth added. By the time they finished with all the children, it was late afternoon. Reed had filled 2 notebooks with testimony, Claire's hand cramping from writing. This is good, Reed said, organizing his papers. This is exactly what I need. Now what? Evelyn asked. Now I file charges. Should take 2 days to process, then I'll have federal marshals here to arrest Granger and Pike. And until then, you stay here and stay safe. Reed stood, packed his satchel. I'll have armed deputies posted at the property line. Nobody gets through without my authorization. He left with Clara, his carriage disappearing down the road. The children gathered in the main room, quiet and subdued after spending the day reliving their worst memories. Is it over? Isaiah asked. Not yet, Evelyn said. But soon. You promise? She looked at him, at all of them, and Caleb saw her struggle with the lie, saw her want to promise something she couldn't guarantee. I promise I'll do everything I can, she said finally. It wasn't the answer Isaiah wanted, but it was the only honest one she could give. That night, Caleb was woken by the sound of breaking glass. He bolted upright, grabbing his rifle, and ran outside. The bunkhouse window had been shattered, and smoke was pouring from inside. Fire, he shouted. Everyone out! The children stumbled out coughing, eyes streaming. Mateo was already there with buckets, trying to douse flames that were spreading fast. But this wasn't like the barn fire. This was smaller, contained, almost deliberate. Caleb kicked in the door and saw it immediately. A broken bottle with a rag stuffed in the neck, still burning on the floor. Someone had thrown it through the window. He stamped out the flames before they could spread, then turned to look outside. At the edge of the property, barely visible in the darkness, he saw riders. 3 of them, watching. One raised a hand in a mocking salute, then they disappeared into the night. Warning, Mateo said, coming up beside him. They're telling us they can reach us anytime they want. Where were Vivian's guards? Good question. They found one guard unconscious near the fence line, blood on his head from where someone had clubbed him from behind. The other 2 were gone, either ran off or were dragged away. Caleb helped the injured guard into the house, then gathered the children. We're leaving, he said. Right now. Where are we going? Evelyn asked. Somewhere they can't reach us. Somewhere safe. There is no somewhere safe, Evelyn said. You said it yourself. They can reach us anywhere. Then we make it harder for them. He saddled the horses while Mateo packed supplies. The children dressed quickly, faces pale with fear and exhaustion. They left the ranch 30 minutes later, riding north into darkness. Where are we going? Mateo asked. Vivian's estate. If she's got guards there, maybe they're more reliable than the ones she sent here. They rode hard through frozen darkness, children clinging to saddles, breath steaming in the cold air. Behind them, the ranch grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely. Caleb kept looking back, expecting to see riders following, but the road stayed empty. They reached Vivian's estate just before dawn. She met them at the door, already dressed, like she'd been expecting them. They hit your ranch, she said. Not a question. Yeah, firebombed the bunkhouse, took out your guards. I heard. Vivian stepped aside. Come in. You'll be safe here. The children filed inside, too tired to question it. Vivian's servants showed them to rooms upstairs, brought food and warm blankets. Caleb stayed downstairs with Vivian and Mateo. This is getting out of control, Vivian said. Granger's escalating faster than I expected. Can Reed move any quicker? He's trying, But the legal system moves at its own pace. Could be days before the warrants are issued. We don't have days, Caleb said. I know. Vivian poured 3 glasses of whiskey, handed them around, which is why I've taken additional measures. What measures? I've hired private security, 15 men, all veterans. They'll guard this property until Reed's marshals arrive. And if Granger comes before then? Vivian's smile was cold. Then my men are authorized to use whatever force is necessary to protect those children. Caleb drank his whiskey, feeling it burn down his throat. This is turning into a war. It was always a war, Mercer. You just didn't realize it yet. Upstairs, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She sat by the window in the room Vivian had given her, watching the grounds below. Armed men patrolled the perimeter, rifles visible in the lamplight. May knocked softly and entered. You okay? No. May sat beside her. Me neither. They sat in silence for a while. Then May said, Do you think we'll survive this? I don't know. That's not like you. You always know. I'm tired of pretending I know things I don't. Evelyn's voice cracked. I'm tired of being strong. I'm tired of being the one everyone looks to for answers. Then don't be. Just for tonight, let someone else carry it. And who's going to do that, Caleb? He's doing everything he can, but he's still just one man against an entire system. Reed's going to stop them. Maybe. Or maybe he'll fail and we'll end up dead or worse. Evelyn looked at May. You know what the worst part is? Part of me wishes we'd just stayed in that cabin and frozen to death. At least then it would be over. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. May grabbed her hand. Because we didn't freeze. We survived. And we're still surviving, no matter how bad it gets. Evelyn wanted to believe her, wanted to find hope in those words. But hope felt like a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. The next morning, Reed returned with news. The warrants are issued, he said. Federal marshals are on their way to arrest Granger and Pike. Should be here by tomorrow night. What about the children? Caleb asked. Emergency injunction granted. No child removal until the trial is complete. Anyone who tries faces federal charges. For the first time in days, Caleb felt something like relief. But it didn't last. Because that afternoon, one of Vivian's guards came running in, breathless and bleeding. They took her, he gasped. They took the girl. What girl? Caleb demanded. The one with the bad leg. Evelyn. They ambushed the carriage on the way to the rail station. Caleb's blood turned to ice. What the hell was she doing at the rail station? Mrs. Sterling asked her to deliver papers to Reed's office. I was escorting her. The guard slumped against the wall. They came out of nowhere. 6 men, maybe more. I tried to stop them, but he didn't finish. Caleb turned to Vivian. You sent her out there alone? She wasn't alone. She had a guard. 1 guard against 6 men? I didn't know they'd be waiting. You should have known, Caleb's voice was raw. You know what Granger's capable of. You know he's desperate. And you sent a 13-year-old girl out there like bait. Vivian's face was stone. I made a mistake. A mistake? Caleb grabbed her by the shoulders. That girl's been through hell. She trusted you, trusted me, to keep her safe, and we failed her. Let go of me, Mercer. Not until you tell me how we fix this. We find her. How? Vivian pulled free, straightened her dress. I have resources. I'll send men to search. That's not good enough. It's all I have. Caleb turned to Mateo. Get the horses. Where are we going? To find her. Reed stepped forward. Mercer, wait. If you go after Granger now, you'll compromise the entire investigation. Let the marshals handle it. The marshals aren't here yet, and by the time they arrive, Evelyn could be dead. Or she could be leverage. Granger might be holding her to negotiate. I'm not negotiating with a man who traffics children. Then what are you going to do? Storm his operation with 2 men and a rifle? That's suicide. Maybe. But it's better than sitting here doing nothing. Reed grabbed his arm. Mercer, listen to me. I've been chasing men like Granger for years. They don't care about individual lives. They only care about the operation. If you attack him directly, he'll kill Evelyn and disappear before the marshals can touch him. So what do you suggest? We wait. Granger will contact us. He'll want something in exchange for her. And if he doesn't? Reed didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. If Granger didn't contact them, it meant Evelyn was already dead. Caleb stood there, fury and helplessness warring inside him. Every instinct screamed to ride out and tear the territory apart looking for her. But Reed was right. Going after Granger blind would only get them both killed. He forced himself to take a breath. To think. "How long do we wait?" he asked finally. 24 hours. If we don't hear from him by then, we move. Caleb nodded once. Then he turned and walked outside before anyone could see him break. In a mining camp 40 miles north, Evelyn woke to darkness and the smell of damp earth. She was chained to a support beam in what looked like an abandoned storage room. Her head throbbed from where someone had hit her during the ambush. Blood crusted the side of her face. She tried to stand, but her crippled leg gave out immediately, sending white-hot pain up her spine. Footsteps approached. A door opened, lamplight spilling in. Silas Granger walked in, immaculate as always in his expensive coat. "Good, you're awake," he said pleasantly. "I was beginning to worry I'd hit you too hard." "Go to hell," Evelyn spat. Granger smiled. "Spirited. I like that. Makes this more interesting." He crouched down in front of her, studying her face like she was a curiosity. "Do you know why you're here, Evelyn?" "Because you're a coward who kidnaps children." "No. You're here because you're valuable." He stood, brushed dust from his knees. "You see, Mercer and that meddling prosecutor think they can destroy my organization with testimony and warrants. They think the law matters. It does matter. No, it doesn't. What matters is leverage, and right now you're my leverage. They won't give you what you want. Won't they? Let's see. I'm betting Mercer cares more about saving one crippled girl than he does about justice." Granger walked to the door. "I'll send word tomorrow. Either they back off and let me leave the territory quietly, or I ship you east with the next batch of children. You'll work in a textile mill until your body gives out, which shouldn't take long given your condition." "Caleb won't let that happen." "Caleb can't stop it. No one can." Granger paused in the doorway. "Get some rest, Evelyn. You're going to need your strength." He left, locking the door behind him. Evelyn sat in the darkness, chains cold against her wrists. For the first time since that frozen cabin, she let herself cry. Not from fear, not from pain. From rage at a world that kept taking everything she tried to protect. But even as she cried, her mind was working, looking for weaknesses, looking for escape routes, because she hadn't survived this long by giving up. And she wasn't about to start now. The message arrived at dawn, delivered by a boy who couldn't have been more than 10 years old. He handed Vivian a sealed envelope, took the coin she offered, and disappeared before anyone could ask questions. Caleb tore open the envelope and read Granger's terms aloud. "Withdraw all charges, destroy all evidence. Allow me safe passage out of the territory with my current assets. You have 12 hours to comply. If you refuse, the girl disappears into the labor system and you'll never find her." He crumpled the paper in his fist. "Assets," Mateo said quietly. "He means the children he's already got locked up somewhere." Reed paced the room, face tight with anger. "He's desperate. The warrant spooked him. He knows if he stays, he's going to prison. So we give him what he wants," Vivian said. Everyone turned to stare at her. "Excuse me?" Reed's voice was ice. "We agree to his terms. Tell him we'll back off. Then, when he brings Evelyn to make the exchange, we take him." "That's entrapment. I don't care what it is. It gets the girl back alive." "And it destroys the entire case," Reed said. "Any confession he makes under duress will be inadmissible. Any evidence we gather through deception will be thrown out. We'd be handing him a legal defense on a silver platter." "Then we don't arrest him legally." Vivian's voice was cold. "We handle it another way." "You're talking about murder." "I'm talking about justice." "That's not justice. That's revenge." "Call it whatever you want." Vivian looked at Caleb. "What matters is getting Evelyn back. Everything else is secondary." Caleb stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the mountains. He thought about Evelyn sitting in some dark room, terrified and alone. Thought about all the other children Granger had destroyed over the years. Thought about the difference between what was legal and what was right. "We can't give him the evidence," he said finally. "Too many kids' stories in there. Too many lives. We destroy that, and they all disappear like they never existed." "So what do you suggest?" Vivian asked. "We make him think we're cooperating, set up an exchange, but we don't destroy the evidence and we don't let him leave." How do we stop him without compromising the case? Caleb turned to face them. We let him run, and we follow him straight to wherever he's hiding the rest of those kids. Reed considered this. If we can document the location, find physical evidence of the operation, that's grounds for immediate federal intervention. We wouldn't need Granger's confession. Exactly. It's risky. If he suspects we're following him, then we make sure he doesn't suspect. Mateo spoke up. How do we even know he'll lead us anywhere? He might just take Evelyn and disappear. He won't. Caleb's voice was certain. He's got too much invested in this operation to abandon it completely. He'll go back for the other children. That's his leverage, his income. He needs them. You're betting Evelyn's life on that assumption, Reed said. I'm betting on Granger's greed. Men like him don't walk away from profit. Reed was quiet for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, we try it your way. But if this goes wrong, it won't. You can't know that. No, Caleb admitted. I can't. But it's the best chance we've got. They spent the next 3 hours planning. Reed would send word that they were withdrawing charges. Vivian would arrange the exchange, neutral ground, minimal witnesses. And Caleb and Mateo would track Granger after he left, following him to whatever hole he'd been using to hide captured children. The federal marshals, who had finally arrived that morning, would wait at the edge of town, ready to move the moment Caleb signaled them. It was a fragile plan built on assumptions and hope, but it was all they had. In the mining camp, Evelyn had been working on her chains for hours. The lock was old, rusted. She'd found a piece of wire on the floor and was using it to pick the mechanism, fingers cramping from the repetitive motion. She'd learned this skill from Thomas before he disappeared. He'd been a pickpocket in Philadelphia before joining the wagon train, and he'd taught her the basics during long nights when there was nothing else to do. The lock clicked. Evelyn froze, listening. Footsteps outside, but they passed by without stopping. She carefully removed the chains and stood, testing her bad leg. Pain shot through it immediately, but she could walk. Barely. The door was locked from the outside. She pressed her ear against it, counting the guards. 2, maybe 3. All armed. Going through the door was suicide. She looked up. The ceiling was low, wooden beams crisscrossed with gaps between them. And through those gaps, she could see daylight. It took her 20 minutes to climb up, using the support beam and a stack of crates. Every movement sent agony through her leg, but she gritted her teeth and kept going. She reached the ceiling and started prying at the boards. They were old, rotted in places. One came loose with a crack that sounded like thunder in the small room. She froze again, waiting for guards to burst in. Nothing. She kept working, pulling boards free one by one until there was a gap just wide enough for her to squeeze through. Outside, she found herself on the roof of a long, low building. Around her were dozens of similar structures, old mining buildings slowly collapsing from neglect. The camp was bigger than she'd expected, sprawling across a hillside with paths connecting the various buildings. And in the largest building at the center, she heard voices. Children's voices. Evelyn carefully climbed down from the roof, using drainage pipes and window ledges. Her leg nearly gave out twice, but she made it to the ground. She crept toward the main building, staying low, using shadows for cover. Through a broken window, she saw them. 30, maybe 40 children. Ages ranging from 6 to 16, packed into a single room like livestock. Some were sleeping on the floor, others sat against walls, staring at nothing. Guards moved among them, checking chains, counting heads. Evelyn's blood went cold. This was where they brought the children before shipping them east. This was the staging ground. She had to get word to Caleb, had to tell someone where this place was. But first she had to survive long enough to do it. She backed away from the window and nearly ran straight into one of Granger's men. He grabbed her before she could run, hand clamping over her mouth. Trying to escape? Granger's not going to like that. Evelyn bit down hard on his fingers. He yelped and loosened his grip just enough for her to slam her elbow into his stomach. He doubled over, and she brought her knee up into his face. He went down hard. Evelyn grabbed his knife and ran, ignoring the fire in her leg. Behind her, shouts erupted. More guards coming. She made it maybe 50 yards before they tackled her to the ground. They dragged her back to Granger, who stood waiting with that same pleasant smile. That was impressive, he said. Stupid, but impressive. Go to hell. Eventually, perhaps, but not today. He gestured to his men. Chain her up properly this time, and double the guards. If she escapes again, I'll hold you personally responsible." They hauled her back to the storage room, this time chaining both her hands and feet to different support beams so she couldn't reach the locks. Granger watched them work. "You're a fighter, Evelyn. I respect that. In another life, you might have been something special." "I'm something special right now. I'm the one who's going to watch you hang." Brave words from a girl in chains. He turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. You and those other children could have had good lives if you'd just cooperated. But you made your choice. So did you. Yes, I chose to survive in a world that doesn't care about people like us. You should try it sometime." He left, locking the door behind him. Evelyn sat in the darkness, testing the new chains. They were tighter, stronger. No picking these locks. But she'd seen the children, seen the operation. And if she could just stay alive long enough, maybe Caleb would find her. Find all of them. She had to believe that, because the alternative was giving up. And she'd sworn she'd never do that again. The exchange was set for noon at an abandoned way station halfway between Black Hollow and the mining territories. Caleb arrived early with Mateo, both armed, both scanning the area for threats. The way station was a single building with broken windows and a collapsed roof on one end. Perfect place for an ambush. "I don't like this," Mateo muttered. "Neither do I." Reed's marshals were hidden a mile back, ready to move on Caleb's signal. Vivian had stayed in town, coordinating communications. Everything was in place. At exactly noon, Granger's carriage arrived. He stepped out alone, hands visible, that same pleasant smile fixed on his face. "Mr. Mercer, punctual. I appreciate that." "Where's Evelyn?" "Safe, for now," Granger gestured to the carriage. "Where are the documents? The evidence you agreed to destroy?" "First, I see the girl." "That's not how this works." Caleb raised his rifle. "That's exactly how this works. Show me Evelyn, alive and unharmed. Then we talk." Granger's smile tightened. He turned to the carriage and called out, "Bring her." Two men dragged Evelyn out. She was chained hand and foot, her face bruised, her leg bleeding through fresh bandages, but her eyes were bright with fury. "Caleb," she said, "don't give him anything. There are children, dozens of them, at the mining camp. He's got them locked up, ready to ship east. You have to—" One of the guards hit her across the face, cutting her off. Caleb's rifle moved to the guard. "Touch her again and I'll kill you right here." "Easy," Granger said. "No need for violence. As you can see, the girl is alive. Now, you're part of the agreement?" Caleb pulled out a leather portfolio, the same one Reed had shown them days earlier. "Everything's here. Testimony, financial records, witness statements, all the evidence you wanted destroyed." "Excellent." Granger reached for it. Caleb pulled it back. "Not until Evelyn's free." "Of course." Granger nodded to his men. "Release her." They unchained Evelyn and shoved her forward. She stumbled, nearly fell, but caught herself and limped toward Caleb. The moment she reached him, Caleb handed the portfolio to Granger. Granger flipped through it quickly, checking pages. His smile widened. "Perfect. A pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Mercer." He climbed back into his carriage. "Oh, and one more thing. Tell that prosecutor friend of yours that he should have stayed in his office. Men who ask too many questions tend to have short careers." The carriage rolled away, heading north. Caleb helped Evelyn onto his horse while Mateo mounted up beside them. "You really give him the evidence?" Evelyn asked. "Copies. Reed kept the originals." "He's heading to the mining camp," Evelyn said quickly. "About 40 miles north. There's at least 30 children there, maybe more. Guards everywhere. He's planning to move them soon." "We know. We're following him." "What?" "He thinks we backed off, thinks he's safe, but we're tracking him straight to the operation." Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Caleb, those children, some of them can barely walk. They've been there for weeks, maybe months. If Granger figures out you're following him, he might kill them all rather than let them be rescued." "That's why we're not giving him time to figure it out." They rode hard, staying far enough back that Granger wouldn't spot them, but close enough to track the carriage. Mateo had marked the wheels with a specific mud compound that left distinctive tracks. 2 hours later, the carriage turned off the main road onto a narrow path leading into the mountains. "This is it," Caleb said. He fired a single shot into the air, the signal. In the distance, he heard answering shots. The marshals were moving. They followed the carriage to the mining camp, staying hidden in the tree line. Below them, Evelyn had been right. The place was massive. Multiple buildings, armed guards patrolling, and in the center that large structure where the children were being held. Granger's carriage rolled to a stop. He climbed out, calling orders to his men. "Get them ready for transport. We're moving tonight instead of tomorrow. I want every child on a wagon within the hour." "What about the law?" one of his men asked. "The law just destroyed their own evidence. By the time they realize what happened, we'll be 3 territories away." Granger smiled. "Sometimes the easiest way to win is to let your enemy think they already have." Caleb and Mateo exchanged glances. If they waited for the marshals, Granger would have the children loaded and moving. They'd lose them in the mountains. "We can't wait," Caleb said. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking 2 men with good aim can cause a lot of chaos. That's suicide." "Maybe. You in?" Mateo checked his rifle. "Wouldn't miss it." Evelyn grabbed Caleb's arm. "You can't go down there. There's too many of them." "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do. Wait for the marshals." "And let Granger move those children?" "No." Caleb looked at her. "You stay here. When the marshals arrive, tell them what's happening." "Caleb, that's not a request, Evelyn. You stay here." He and Mateo moved down the hillside, using rocks and brush for cover. They got within 100 yards of the camp before someone spotted them. "Intruders!" a guard shouted. Gunfire erupted. Caleb and Mateo dove behind a rock outcropping, returning fire. 2 guards went down. More came running. Inside the main building, children started screaming. Granger appeared in the doorway, face twisted with rage. "Mercer, you're a fool. Did you really think I wouldn't prepare for betrayal?" More guards appeared from other buildings. 10, 15, 20 of them, all armed. Caleb and Mateo were pinned down, bullets chipping away at their cover. "This wasn't your best plan," Mateo said. "I'm open to suggestions." "We could surrender." "He'd kill us anyway." "Fair point." Then from the north, they heard it. Hoofbeats. Lots of them. The federal marshals crested the ridge, 15 strong, rifles ready. Behind them came Vivian Sterling with another 20 men, and behind them half the damn town of Black Hollow. Ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, anyone who'd heard about the children and decided they'd had enough of men like Granger and Pike. It wasn't an army, but it was close. Granger's face went pale. He turned to run, but Reed himself appeared, blocking the door. "Silas Granger," Reed said clearly. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, and trafficking. Surrender now or face federal charges of resisting arrest." Granger looked around at the guns pointed at him from every direction, at the marshals closing in, at the townspeople who'd decided that some things mattered more than staying quiet. He raised his hand slowly. His guards followed suit, weapons dropping to the ground. The marshals moved in, chaining them quickly and efficiently. Reed walked past Granger without a word and pushed open the door to the main building. Inside, children huddled together, filthy and terrified. Some barely conscious, others too weak to stand. Reed stood there for a moment, taking it in. Then he turned to the marshals. "Get them out, all of them. Medical attention, food, water, whatever they need." The children started coming out slowly, squinting in the daylight. Some cried. Some just stared. One little girl ran straight to Caleb and grabbed his leg, holding on like she'd never let go. Evelyn limped down from the hillside, and when the children saw her, several ran to her. She dropped to her knees, gathering them close, whispering words Caleb couldn't hear. Marcus appeared from the building, supporting a younger boy who could barely walk. Connor followed with twins who looked like Ruth and Rose's younger sisters. Isaiah carried a toddler who reminded Caleb painfully of little Henry. They kept coming. 37 children total. 37 lives that had been stolen and nearly destroyed. Reed stood beside Caleb, watching them emerge. "This is just one location. Granger had at least 3 others across the territories. Will you shut them all down?" "Every single one." Reed's voice was steel. "And I'm going to make sure everyone involved pays. Pike, the judges, the factory owners, the politicians, all of them. That'll take years. Then I'll spend years doing it." Reed looked at him. "You did good today, Mercer. You saved these children." "No," Caleb said, watching Evelyn hold the crying children. "She saved them. I just helped." Sheriff Pike was arrested that night at his home. He tried to run but didn't make it past his front door. The marshals found $30,000 in cash hidden in his cellar, payment for children he'd sold. Judge Morrison, who'd signed the court orders authorizing child removals, was arrested the next morning. 2 state senators followed, a factory owner in Pennsylvania, a mine operator in Nevada. The arrests kept coming, spreading across territories like wildfire. Within a month, the Western Children's Aid Society was dissolved. Within 6 months, federal laws were passed regulating orphan placement. Within a year, dozens of officials were in prison. It didn't fix everything. Children were still vulnerable, still exploited in ways the law couldn't always reach. But it was something. It was a start. The children from the mining camp were placed in temporary care while Reed worked to find them proper homes. Some had relatives who'd been searching for them. Others needed new families. The 7 children from Evelyn's group stayed at Caleb's ranch. It wasn't easy. The ranch was still broke. Winter was still brutal. Food was still tight. But the town helped. People who'd ignored the problem before suddenly couldn't stop seeing it. Donations arrived daily. Volunteers showed up to rebuild the barn. The church, hypocrites that they were, suddenly remembered their duty to orphans. Caleb accepted their help even though it made him angry. Because the children needed it, and pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. Evelyn healed slowly. Her leg would never be right. The doctor said the damage was permanent. But she could walk without quite as much pain, and that was something. She spent most of her time with Lydia, who was talking more now. Not a lot, but enough. She'd whisper stories to Evelyn at night, stories about her family, about the fire, about things she'd kept locked inside for months. And slowly, carefully, she started to heal. One evening, 6 months after the rescue, Caleb found Evelyn sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. "You all right?" he asked. "Yeah, just thinking." About how different things could have been, if you hadn't found us in that cabin, if you just kept writing. But I didn't. Why not? Most people would have. Caleb sat down beside her. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because I was tired of being alone. Maybe because I needed something to care about again. Maybe because walking past that frozen hand felt like the worst thing I could do. So you saved us to save yourself. Maybe. Does that make it wrong? Evelyn thought about it. No, I used to think people had to be perfect to be good. That help only counted if it came from pure intentions. But I don't think that anymore. What changed? I realized that perfect people don't exist. Everyone's broken in some way. Everyone's carrying something. She looked at him. You lost your family, and you're still figuring out how to live with that. I lost mine too. We're both just trying to survive the best way we know how. And you think that's enough? I think it has to be. Because if we wait for perfect people to save us, we'll be waiting forever. Caleb thought about that. About his wife and sons dead from fever. About 6 years of just existing, not living. About finding 9 starving children and deciding their survival mattered more than his comfort. You're smarter than I was at 13, he said. I had to be. World doesn't let kids like me stay kids for very long. Maybe it should. Yeah, maybe. Evelyn stood, testing her bad leg. I'm going to check on the others, make sure they're not burning down the kitchen again. She limped inside, and Caleb stayed on the porch, watching darkness settle over the ranch. Mateo came out a few minutes later with 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Caleb and sat down. You thinking about leaving? Mateo asked. What? You've got that look, the one people get when they're planning to run. I'm not running. You sure? Because I wouldn't blame you if you did. This is a lot. 8 kids, a failing ranch, a town that still doesn't fully trust us. It'd be easier to walk away. Easier doesn't mean better. No, it doesn't. Mateo sipped his coffee. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed. These kids need you. They need someone. Doesn't have to be me. Yeah, it does. Because you're the one who chose them when no one else would. That matters. They sat in comfortable silence, drinking coffee and watching stars appear overhead. A year later, the ranch was officially renamed Black Hollow Haven. People started calling it that anyway, so Caleb just made it official. More children arrived. Some stayed temporarily. Others became permanent. Evelyn became a teacher, working with children who couldn't attend regular schools because of disabilities or trauma. She was fierce and uncompromising, refusing to accept anything less than their best effort. The children respected her for it. Marcus became Caleb's right hand, managing livestock and teaching the younger kids how to work the land. He never smiled much, but he was steady, reliable. Connor turned out to have a gift with horses. Caleb started breeding them specifically for Connor to train, and within 2 years, people were traveling from other territories to buy horses gentle enough for children and women. Isaiah learned to read and write, then taught the others. He had patience that surprised everyone, especially with the youngest children who struggled. May studied law with Reed, who visited regularly. She wanted to fight the system that had failed her, and Reed believed she'd be brilliant at it. Rose and Ruth opened a small bakery in town using recipes their Irish mother had taught them before she disappeared. Their bread became famous across the territory. And Lydia started painting. She couldn't talk about the fire, but she could paint it, violent, beautiful images of destruction and survival that moved people to tears. Her work sold for more money than anyone expected. She used it to help fund the Haven. Vivian kept her distance but sent regular donations. The debt she'd mentioned never materialized, and Caleb eventually stopped waiting for it. Maybe that was payment enough, watching the children survive when her nephews hadn't. Caleb never remarried, never had more children of his own, but the ranch filled with life anyway, with laughter and arguments and the messy, complicated business of growing up. Some nights, when it was quiet, he'd stand on the porch and think about that frozen hand reaching through the snow, about the choice he'd made to stop instead of keep riding, about how one decision changed everything. He didn't believe in fate or destiny or divine intervention. He believed in people making choices, for better or worse. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, people chose kindness over comfort. They chose compassion over convenience. They chose to stop when it would have been easier to keep going. That's what survival really meant, Caleb decided. Not just staying alive yourself, but pulling others through the cold with you, because nobody should face the winter alone. On a summer evening 5 years after the rescue, the Haven held its first official gathering. Children from across the territory who'd been helped by Reed's reforms came to share their stories. There were over 100 of them. Some had found families, some were living independently. Some were still struggling but surviving. They shared meals and memories, comparing scars and celebrating survival. Evelyn stood at the center of it all, 21 years old now, her crippled leg barely slowing her down anymore. She'd grown into someone formidable, tough, brilliant, uncompromising. But when the youngest children gathered around her asking for stories, she sat down in the grass and became gentle again. Caleb watched from the porch, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. The world was still brutal. Children still suffered. The fight wasn't over. But for this moment, in this place, they'd carved out something rare. They'd created hope from ashes. They'd turned survival into purpose. And maybe that was enough. Mateo walked up beside him. "We did good." "Yeah," Caleb said. "We did." "You think it'll last? The reforms, the laws, all of it?" "I don't know. People forget. Systems break down. Evil finds new ways to hide." Optimistic as always. Caleb smiled slightly. "But as long as there are people willing to fight back, willing to stop and help instead of walking past, maybe we've got a chance." That's a lot of maybes. "It's all I've got." They stood there watching children play in the fading light, their laughter carrying across the ranch that had once been silent. And Caleb thought about his wife and sons, dead and gone but not forgotten. Thought about how grief had almost killed him until he found something bigger than his pain. He'd learned something important in these 5 years. Saving others didn't erase your own wounds. It didn't make the hurt disappear or bring back what you'd lost. But it gave the pain meaning. It transformed suffering into purpose. And sometimes that was the only way to survive, by making sure your struggle meant something for someone else. As darkness fell, the children started a bonfire. They sang songs, told stories, shared food. Evelyn stood and raised her cup. "To Caleb Mercer," she said loudly, "the man who stopped when everyone else kept riding." The other children echoed her toast. Some who'd never met him joined in anyway, because the story had spread. The rancher who found 9 starving children and refused to let them die. Caleb felt his face heat with embarrassment. "I didn't do it alone." "No," Evelyn said, limping over to him. "You didn't, but you did it first, and that matters." She hugged him quickly, then returned to the fire. Caleb stood there feeling the weight of 5 years. of 8 children grown into young adults, of a ranch transformed into a sanctuary. He'd started this journey thinking he was saving them. But the truth was simpler and more complicated. They'd saved each other. That frozen hand reaching through the snow had been reaching for him as much as for help. It had pulled him out of grief and back into life. It had reminded him that mattering meant choosing to matter. That hope wasn't something you waited for. It was something you built, brick by painful brick, out of whatever materials survived the storm. And sometimes salvation came from the most unlikely places. From a crippled 13-year-old girl who refused to give up. From 7 other children who kept each other alive through impossible odds. From a broken rancher who decided one frozen morning that some things were worth fighting for. The fire burned bright against the darkness. Children's voices rose in songs that spoke of survival and struggle and finding home in unexpected places. And Caleb Mercer, who'd lost everything and found it again in a way he never expected, finally understood something that had eluded him for 6 long years. This was what healing looked like. Not perfect, not painless, not neat or easy or complete, but real. And that was enough.